Okay, right to the point. Do tripods really suck? Well, not exactly. It just depends on the situation. I use tripods outside all the time. I think I have at least 4 of them for different uses and situations. But here in the shop where floor space is limited, they just aren't the ideal solution. With my new rolling camera stand, I take up a much smaller footprint, which allows me to position the camera closer to tools and workbenches, and with the long pivoting boom arm, I can actually get out over the top of my projects without being in the way. So it actually gives me new camera angles I couldn't get before. And lastly, I can very quickly adjust through the entire height range by just turning one knob. On a tripod, I have to adjust the height on all 3 legs through multiple leg segments to get through its entire usable height. I started by breaking down some massive oak slabs to make up the rolling base. This might have been overkill, but I wanted it to be sturdy and weigh a lot, so 8/4 oak seemed perfect. The milling process was the same as it always is. Get a relatively straight edge with the bandsaw, then flatten one face and square up that edge on the joiner. Then I used my planer to make the other face flat and parallel. I ripped the other edge off on my table saw, then broke the boards down to rough length before gluing them together into large panels. My very rudimentary math skills told me that I could fit 2 50-pound bags of sand inside the box if I made it 15 inches square. I'm sure that 100 pounds is way more than I need to hold up a small camera, but I wanted to have too much space instead of too little. I cut the top, bottom, and 2 side panels to their final sizes on the table saw, then used those pieces to mark out the exact size of the remaining 2 sides, then cut them out as well. I marked the center point on the top and bottom panels, then pre-drilled holes all the way around the perimeter of the bottom, then used glue and screws to attach the first side. Before getting any further ahead of myself, I marked the location of the flange that I'll use to hold the metal pipe in place. Then I drilled mounting holes through the bottom and used bolts to lock it down. Working my way around, I finished the box one panel at a time using glue and screws, making sure everything was tight with no gaps where sand could leak out. I used a Forstner bit to drill a hole in the center of the top that was just barely big enough to let the pole slide through. Then, I threaded the pole into the flange and tightened it down. I clamped the top on the box, making sure all the sides were flush. This made sure any lean in the pole was corrected before I drilled pilot holes through the top and into the sides. I also made a quick mark so I knew what corners to line back up later. Before filling the base with sand, I attached 4 small casters to the bottom. These were casters I salvaged from somewhere else, and if I was going to do this again, I would buy new, high-quality ones and maybe even a larger diameter, so this whole thing would roll over my uneven floor a little better. I flipped the box back over and put the pipe back in before starting to fill it with sand. I went with sand rather than concrete because if I ever wanted to hit Control-Z on this project and do it differently, or recycle my materials, I could just dump it out and not have to deal with a cube of concrete. I used a trash bag as a liner to help keep sand from leaking out in the event that my seams ever open up due to wood movement. I started out by filling it full, but I decided it was way more weight than I needed. I ended up with roughly 1.5 bags of sand inside before I lined up the top and screwed it down. Moving on to the camera arm, I started by drilling a hole in the center of a thick piece of ash that was ripped to the same width as the diameter of the pipe. I used ash because it's hard and hopefully the threads will hold up to a lifetime of use. These threads will never have to deal with a lot of torque, just repetitive use. I attached the ash to one end of a strip of scrap plywood, then I held that corner up to the pipe and marked the location where the second block would go. I drilled pilot holes, then used CA glue and accelerator to hold the block so I could flip it over and run in screws from the back. Then, I attached one last scrap of plywood to span the gap between the blocks. I thought this support arm looked too blocky and could stand to lose some weight, so I drew a curve down the length of it and cut to that line on my bandsaw. I repurposed a knob I made for a different project, then ran it all the way in to make sure the threads were nice and smooth.
Dad?
Yeah?
Can you tell them something?
Can you tell what? Tell the camera something?
Yeah.
Well, I'll point it right at you if you want me to.
We're making this thing that... We're recording this. Not me, please.
You just want your voice, you don't want your face?
Yeah.
Well, try it once this way, and then I'll turn it.
Okay. We're building the thing that the camera will be sitting on. In the next video, the camera will be up high, like really high.
I attached a long piece of cedar to the top, then slid the whole assembly onto the pipe to see how it worked. I was able to pull on the end pretty hard without breaking it or tipping over. So I knew my lightweight camera would be no problem. And the sliding and pivoting moved very smoothly and only took the slightest turn of the knob to lock it in place. I drilled a hole in the end of the top board and tapped in a carriage bolt from the bottom. Then I spun on a cheap ball mount that I bought on Amazon. This mount is handy because it takes the same plate as my regular tripod, so if I need to go from one to the other, I don't have to switch any hardware. Lastly, I wanted a little insurance to make sure that if this arm accidentally slipped down the pipe on its own, my camera wouldn't end up smashed to little pieces on the ground. So I used a zip tie to attach one end of a bungee cord to the top of the pipe and screwed the other end to the side of the arm. Then I tested it using a clamp on the end of the arm to simulate the weight of a camera. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I didn't make any plans for this because it's just too simple. I figure you can work it out for yourself just like I did. If you need another example to go on, Jay Bates built one of these years ago. Similar solution to the same problem, just a little bit different way of doing it, so you should go check his out. And that's about it. Thanks guys, we'll see you next time.